Okay, we're going down under, all the way to Melbourne, Australia. And let's welcome Siobhan McHale. She's the Executive General Manager for a large company in Melbourne called DULUX, D-U-L-U-X. DULUX Group is sort of like Home Depot. They're a manufacturer of home improvement materials and products and a big retailer. Siobhan McHale is in charge of people and culture. She's also now an author of a rapidly growing bestseller, The Insider's Guide to Culture, Corporate Culture, and how it means and enables or prevents engagement, productivity, and better work life. We're going to learn from Siobhan McHale. Hi, this is Ed Cohen. I'm in California, and as you can see on the screen is Siobhan McHale, who's Executive General Manager with DULUX, D-U-L-U-X Group, the Lux Group based in Australia. A special guest today. We're going to have several people on the show, but this is a brief introduction of Siobhan. She is a culture change transformer. She's worked across 4 continents. And here's Siobhan. Tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Ed. And I define myself as an insider. So I've really been for the last 2 decades, the executive in charge of culture change in a series of multinational organizations working across 4 continents. So I've really sort of moved from being an external consultant to rolling my sleeves up and really testing out what works best, what are the tools that work best when it comes to transforming your workplace culture.
Now, recently you've been given an award, Thinkers 50 Radar. What is that about?
Yeah, so Thinkers 50 Radar selected me as a member. So they select 30 people every year into their group of thinkers that they believe their ideas can help shape the thinking around workplaces and can help make a difference in the world. So I was really chuffed to be selected, but also really delighted that the HR function has been recognized as having an impact on creating better workplaces.
Yeah, so you're an expert in driving culture. That's what you do for a living, but you've done that in several organizations. And we're going to get into this deeper in just a few minutes, but very, very quickly now, just as a peek, if you will, tell us very quickly about the tie-in between what you do at work and your new book.
Yeah, so my new book is called The Insider's Guide to Culture Change, Creating a Workplace That Delivers, Grows, and Adapts. And it's really about a 4-step solution to help workplaces or leaders or managers or HR people who are struggling with a workplace that's perhaps underperforming, that maybe isn't delivering fully to its potential, or perhaps isn't adapting fast enough in these disruptive times. So this is a 4-step solution based on my 30 years of experience in culture change and just condensing it down into one book. And that's my passion, making workplaces better. So as well as being a CHRO, I'm also stepping into my role as an educator.
Okay, that's great. So thank you for this brief intro. When we come back, we will get into this once again. We are expecting several people to join us from more than one country. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Fantastic.
3, 2, 1. Okay, Paul. So Siobhan, Paul will splice this in. And here's Mark Nadich. I want you to meet Siobhan McHale. Siobhan, meet Mark Nadich.
Hi, Siobhan. How are you?
Good. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing great.
Okay, so this is a warm-up right now, although we are recording, and it will get edited in place. I see your very large fingers, and we'll take care of that. So Mark has recently retired from active executive role in talent management, VPHR, with AbbVie, which is a large pharmaceutical based here in the US. Mark, did I say that correctly?
That is correct, Ed.
Yeah, great. So how are you spending your time now for the benefit of Siobhan?
Well, I am involved in a number of boards, both profit and non-for-profit boards. And what I'm doing right now is actually helping people that have been displaced to find new opportunities. That's a big part of what I'm doing right now.
Well, I'm sure that's
Fantastic.
busy. So, Siobhan has just written a book. Perhaps you heard me talk about that a few minutes ago.
Yes.
And it's become a rapid, big seller. Yeah, so congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, so it must have struck a chord. And what with the social distress going on right now and the role of culture, we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. But it's okay to begin to address this with Mark, because Mark is very much in tune with the role of culture.
Fantastic. Great.
That's
Yeah.
great.
So at AbbVie, when you were with AbbVie, Mark, you had a lot of responsibilities, as I understand it. What was the parting responsibility load that you had just before retirement?
Well, I led the business HR organization. I led the labor and employee relations, and I led HR merger and acquisition functions. So, and we had about 30,000 employees. Market cap on the company is about 150 million.
Right.
Right.
So, Mark, just so you know, one of Siobhan's titles is Executive General Manager, and this involves all things connected with people and culture. Is that
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, people, culture, and change.
Great,
That's
great. So you recently published something I saw about the dance as it relates to the social distress. That is, of course, a very provocative thing. And I've been using it today, in my day today, to help promote the show. So it's been all over LinkedIn. I've sent it to about 100,000. And
Wow.
so I'm not sure whether anybody will dare to come, but we may have a big crowd here in the next few minutes.
Yeah, great, exciting.
That's great.
So how many people do you have in your employ right now, Siobhan?
We're part of Nippon Paints, which is the fourth largest paint company in the world, and we've got 20,000 people globally, a little over 20,000 people. So we were taken over by them last year because they were impressed with our growth culture, which is one of the things I've been really working with the executive team on. How do you create a growth culture in an organization? So they saw that and appreciated it and paid the biggest price in recent years for a paint company that's ever been paid globally. So they paid a premium for that culture and capability.
Yeah, well, that's great. So is your book a big seller in Australia as well as here in the States?
Yes, it's popular here. And I think to your point earlier, it's sort of good. It's the timing. So people are at home, they are facing disruption. They know that they have to create more adaptive cultures that can navigate in these times of uncertainty. And they're also looking for somebody who's been there. I think you would know, Mark, when it's the one thing being a consultant, but it's the other thing being in the trenches, having to make change happen and having to mobilize people. And that's where you really sort out what are the theories that work and what are the tools that actually make a difference. And that's what I gather. Because I was looking for years for stuff and thinking, where are the people that have done it before? And then I thought,
they're working hard at doing it. Right?
That'd be you. Yeah, you need to step into that.
Yeah. I don't know if Angela's going to join. I don't know if you heard Angela Lane. If you know Angela Lane, she's a fellow Australian, fantastic person, and she was my my key partner when I worked with her at AbbVie. And just by background, AbbVie is a spinoff of Abbott. And, Abbott was about 100,000 employees. We spun off the proprietary pharma business. And we created our new culture, which was, the most amazing thing to be a part of a almost $20 billion startup company, which was amazing. So Angela has done a phenomenal job. She leads all the talent functions. So if she gets on today, I know she's going crazy. And we just had I say we have been retired, but they just had a very large $63 billion acquisition. So
wow.
So there's going to be a huge opportunity again as the company's, the company continues to grow and change. Is how do you integrate and really meld the appropriate, the best of both worlds, so to speak. And we were able to fortunately do that at Abbott and the spinoff with AbbVie. So it was a remarkable experience for. I was there 7 years. I worked there many years. I left to go work for a company called SC Johnson, which you may know.
Yes,
And then I went back to Abbott in 2010, and I worked 7 more years, and then I retired a couple of years ago. So.
Wow, what a great case study! There's a book.
The credit you should be talking to Angela, because she should get most of the credit. My job was to connect the dots and help people, get connected to, and you can appreciate this. We had basically our strategy on one page, and when we separated, we had 4 key strategies, and one of them was culture. And when you start at the top and you have your CEO and the entire executive leadership team fully committed to that, good things can happen.
Yeah. Fantastic story. Now, I just need to close this door or I'm going to have my cats join in a minute. Excuse me.
Okay. That's great. That's great. Well, Mark, I appreciate you coming here again. Thank you.
Sure. No problem.
Yeah, that's great. So, Siobhan, I'm really curious about how your coworkers view your editorial success with the book, and how has that impacted engagement with your people?
Well, my CEO, Patrick Houlihan, has been incredibly supportive and has actually appeared in my book in a number of stories. And he made the decision a few weeks ago to send a copy of the book to the top 200 executives in the company. So posted it out to everybody, and they're all working from home and they're all reading it at the moment. And I think they're really enjoying it, because the thing with culture, and Mark would know this, is you've got to have a shared language and almost a shared toolkit, because there's so much different meaning making about it that you can be very much at cross purposes. And the way I've defined culture is it's beyond engagement. It's about how the whole company works, and you can decide to create different types of culture. So yeah, it's created a bit of excitement and people reading it and getting value from it, which is really why I wrote it. So I'm chuffed. So
tell us about engagement and your management of people during a work from home environment. It must be a lot of fun, although I'm sure it's challenging.
Yeah, well, we've got a business different brands in our business, but some of our brands are selling quite well. So our paint products, people are painting because they're working from home and they're doing their projects. We have garden care products, so people are doing their gardens. And we also have a product called Sellies, which is like adhesives. And so we're busier in those businesses than we've ever been. So engagement isn't so much the issue for us. People are highly engaged. They're really pleased that they have a job in these disruptive times. But it's more about connectivity. How do we keep that sense of energy and connectivity with our culture and with our group as a whole? So we've been experimenting with different ways of doing that.
So when you assign projects, or when you are looking after projects, and there's a need for people management. Do you have different communication techniques or reporting necessities as a result of working from home?
We have very much a philosophy of leader-led. So we drive the responsibility for communication and the role of key communicator to the team leader. And each team leader decides what is best for that team and what are the rhythms that work best and what are the reporting mechanisms that work best. But then at a central level, we do have certain processes. We have, what really matters reports and work in progress reports. But our philosophy is very much leader-led, and I think that has served us remarkably well.
Great. So, Mark, what do you think of the work from home thing that's going on, and can you relate it to how you would have managed differently, or what?
Well, I mean, in terms of our team, we were a very global team. So 80% of the people that were in my particular organization were outside the United States or thereabouts. I mean, we had a lot of employees outside of the US. And so, but I do think it's really important. I think there were some companies, we always had a culture where, there was flexibility. There are certainly some jobs where you absolutely have to be there every day, and there's other jobs where there's flexibility. I think what is there's nothing good about what has happened, that's for sure. But one maybe a silver lining is there were companies that had very little kind of flexibility in how work got done, and I think what this has proven is that you need to have good alignment of goals and priorities. You need to have good alignment of, how you're getting the work done and accountability to that. But I do think that, that most companies who may have been on the side of, well, this is not going to work, they haven't seen many cases, people I talk to on a pretty regular basis, they've seen a lot of positives that have come out of it. And because of, the COVID-19, in many large cities, I think we're going to have a very different way about how work gets done. I mean, I live outside of Chicago, between Chicago and Milwaukee. And, I sit on a board where we're really trying to figure out how are we going to support the people in the Sears Tower, which is one of the largest buildings in the United States, right? And they said that if people were to go back to work today, it would take 4 hours for them to actually get up to their office. So you're not going to be able to have that opportunity. It's going to force organizations to rethink how work gets done.
So it seems like because of the extra time of admittance and protocol, that companies will not want to have people trips into work. They're going to make working from home work. Yeah. So what is your situation in Melbourne? It must be similar.
Yeah, we're beginning to come out of lockdown now. So we're beginning to think about in different states how we allow people back into the office. And we've really got a phased program. Really, the first phase is you decide as an employee. So if you decide that for whatever reason working from home is not optimal for you, you can decide to come back into the office. Then there's the sort of we decide based on business priorities. And then there's the, we figure out what's the longer term solution here. And I think we will see, some of our workers, the people, for example, in the factories and the people in the field, the sales staff, they are still working from their factories, from their distribution centers, but with social distancing measures. And there are the office-based people who will obviously have to maintain social distancing, and we've got separation for workers and different hygiene practices. But essentially, we're doing a phased approach and really having a lot more flexibility than we had in the past, because I think to Mark's earlier point, we're not going to go back to the same old ways, and we're going to have to figure this out. I think the thing we're thinking about most now is how do you get that sense of brainstorming and creativity that you get when you're together as a group. I think that's the X factor that we've got to figure out how we do that best.
So do you endorse the idea of providing almost everybody with some media training? In other words, how to prepare to look better or sound better on camera?
And you could help me with that, maybe.
Yeah, probably need to get you on board with that, Ed.
I'll tell you what this has done. You know, these glasses here are good for long distance, but I can't see a thing. I'm just looking at the green dot right now.
Yeah, me either. That's good.
Yeah. So what about salespeople? This is for both of you. How would your people make sales? This is really difficult. I'm a salesman, and I have to tell you, it's very difficult. You know, without being face to face. So, you know, how are you training people? I need help too.
Yeah, well, I think we've got very good relationships with our customers already, and they have moved seamlessly to this virtual world, and we've done the same. So it's become very quickly the new normal. It's amazing how flexible people have been. But that's with established relationships. I think it's going to be trickier if you bring in new people on board and they're trying to establish that close connection with their customers. And there's nothing like a face-to-face, as we know. So it's been okay so far, but you know, I think we're going to have to go back to a blended approach at some stage in the future once it's safe to do so.
Yeah. So we're joined in the background by Alicia Scott Wares, and she's in the U.S. Is not going to be on camera, but she is with World of Work, the organization.
Oh, sure.
And so Alicia, if you have a question, feel free to use the chat, and we'll all see the chat, I hope. And if not, then I'll read it. So there will be others joining us. World of Work is a large organization, as you may know. It's like SHRM. And so I was honored to have her on our show earlier today, where the topic was media training and how to look better on camera. It wasn't directed by me. I had a TV actress who's now a professional media trainer conduct the show. I'll send you that link in the next day or two. It was very entertaining.
Yeah,
Okay,
I could definitely do with some of that, Alicia.
Not yet.
Welcome. I think you're going to be in high demand at this time.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. This is great. Okay, so I hope other people too join us. So Siobhan, let's talk about your book, please. And it's a book of a couple of hundred pages. And so what have you got for feedback to you? And, you know, talking about feedback, Angela Lane, I hope she joins us. She co-authored a book about feedback. And if she comes on, then we'll ask her about it. But is feedback is really important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's essential if you want to improve and grow. And I think one of the biggest things for me, are you asking in terms of feedback on my book from readers or feedback?
Yeah, sure. Let's start with that.
Yeah, well, I think people are appreciating my insider perspective, and Mark would know about this. I spent a decade as a consultant flying around 4 continents, flying around the world with PricewaterhouseCoopers and Accenture. And that was a fantastic experience. And an outsider perspective is essential. Sometimes you can see things as an outsider that only an outsider can see. But then over the past 20 years, I've I've become an insider and the executive in charge of change in a series of multinational organizations. And in those insider roles, I learned something different. I learned what really works to accelerate culture change and with less noise. And that's what I bring in the book, those very practical tools and four steps to create a workplace that can deliver, grow, and adapt in these disruptive times. So people really appreciate that. They appreciate the stories, the case studies, and the practicality. And that's what I wanted to bring
So give us an example of what are the four steps in headlines?
Yeah, so the headlines are, I mean, the first step is probably the most critical, and we often are in such a rush to put solutions in place that we forget to diagnose the issues or diagnose and see the patterns. So, for example, when I worked at ANZ Bank in Australia, one of the big four banks here, one of the things I noticed when I walked into the organization was that there was a dysfunctional pattern that was running the firm. So essentially, the staff in head office had stepped into the role of order givers, and they were giving instructions to the staff in the 700 branches who had stepped into the role of order takers. And there was a pattern of relatedness between the two, which was you're to blame for the poor customer service. So no, you're to blame, you're to blame, you're to blame, you're to blame. And we needed to diagnose and see that pattern in order to put the right interventions in place. So we put in a new operating model. We reframed the role of the head office to support provider to the branches. And we reframed the role of the branches to service provider to the customer. And that reframing can bring about rapid change with less noise. You don't have to change people's personalities. You don't have to change the essence of who they are. You can reframe their role or even the role of the parts and bring about faster change with less noise. So diagnose what's really going on before you rush to solutions.
Yeah, Mark, what do you have to say about the four?
Well, I mean, I think that's a terrific point. We live in a world of we want to go right to the answer. And our society, I call it the CNN society. We just want to have the answer. We just want to know what it is. And it's so important to step back and look at that. I love your language that you used. One of the things that we did, we took a step back and said, all right, what are the key business drivers and priorities, right? You got to start with kind of, we had a very simple way of looking at it. What, how, and why. What do we do? What is our business? Okay, so the strategies, the products, the services. For us, it was really having an innovative pipeline. In a pharma business, it's all about the pipeline, right? So you have to know that. Then we spent a lot of time, and I'm very excited to read the book. I'm going to be doing that and buying one quickly. This thing called culture. Right. And how do you want that to be? And we were fortunate that we brought in, some external perspective, right, to help us do some thinking on it. But it was driven by the leadership, right? It was really driven by the executive team and their executive teams, right? And so, but then there was a lot of input from a lot of different people, organizations, but it was very much connected around what we said, how do we want to work? We called it the ways we work. So everyone has their focus. A couple of things that we did that were really important around talent philosophy. How are we going to drive the talent, in our organization? And so there's a whole bunch of things there. And then finally, it really ties to, the purpose and the mission, vision. And we just, we started in those areas and identified those four. And there was a consistent message that went, much to what you just said, is that you have to have, diagnosis of it and then build your plans. And then it's consistently driving that. And it wasn't a fad of the month or fad of the year. It was, this is how we're doing it. And people were aligned and rewarded and recognized for how well we did those things. Siobhan.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's so much richness in what Mark just said, and you could unpack so much there. But one of the things that really resonated for me was that with culture, you must begin with the end in mind. He absolutely nails that, because one of the things is, one of the big myths is we're told that culture, there's a right culture, there's a good culture, but actually that's a big myth. And Mark talked about being in a pharma company and the executive team decided they wanted an innovative culture. What if you're in the military and you decide that in order to keep civilians and soldiers safe in war-torn countries, you need a disciplined culture? You might be in another organization, a manufacturing organization, where you need a very process-driven culture. So culture, sometimes the Drucker's saying culture eats strategy for breakfast. Sometimes I say culture is not in competition with strategy. Culture enables strategy. They're not competing. It's an enabler. You don't create culture for its own sake. You create culture to deliver on your business imperatives. So I really resonated with a lot of what Mark, all of Mark said, but there's a richness there around beginning with the end in mind that is really important for HR people to remember.
So before we get too serious here, may I ask, is Digby in the room with you?
Digby is our English, he's our mascot. He's an English sheepdog, and he is the DULUX group mascot. And when we've got events, Digby comes along, and he's been coming along since the 1960s, so I think it's not really the same Digby. I think there might be other Digbys along the way. He's not with me here today, but if we were filming from my office, you'd see that I have all these fluffy Digby replicas, little fluffy.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, I wanted to see him in action.
No, you won't see him today.
So, okay, now I've got to ask you about culture. You wrote something a few months ago pretty strenuously about it's not HR's role to build the culture, it's from the C-suite. Please go deep on that.
Yeah, so I was probably being provocative. I said it's not HR's role to fix the culture, and it came from HR does have a role, but let me tell you a story about this. I joined an infrastructure company that had been experiencing a lot of commercial issues and it was underperforming, and its share price had plummeted. And I joined the HR team, and I was meeting with each of the executives who were briefing me about the company and its situation. And I had just met with the CFO, and he'd taken me through the financials for over an hour. And it was clear to him that culture change and the shift to a more commercial culture was really required. And as we stood up to leave each other, he shook my hand and he said, "Good luck with changing the culture, Siobhan." And at that moment, I realized that he thought it was my role and my role alone to change the culture. And that was the beginning of a conversation at the executive team about whose role is it to do what during culture change. And we reframed the role that the executive team was responsible for leading the culture change in their parts of the business and across the business as a whole, and that it was HR's role to enable that and to come to them with the tools and the solutions and the processes to help accelerate that change. And that was a major reframing that hadn't happened in the past. So HR kept pushing the change onto the business, and the more that they stepped into the role of driving the change, the more that line managers sort of thought, "Oh, this is good, yeah." Took a step back. I wonder how this will go. I hope they do well. The HR team changing the culture, and they stepped out of their role, and HR stepped more into the role and started pushing the change. So you got this push pattern happening. So HR has a critical role to play during culture change, but from the role as a lead enabler, not from the role of fixing the culture.
So I'd like to bring up a point in today's paper, maybe you heard it yesterday, that the New York Times and some other organizations ditched some senior people for culture mistakes. in the US during this tumultuous week of social unrest are misstatements or missteps. Mark, can you comment about like the New York Times getting rid of their editor? And it's sort of like it's become a bottom-up process rather than a top-down of culture change.
Yeah, I haven't specifically read that one, but there have been a number of them in organizations where people have, just not operated in the appropriate way that we need to. At this moment in time, I think the most important thing we need to do is listen and understand and to project. Now, again, I'm not going to try to get any political commentary on that, because I think in our country, we have a lot of challenges right now. But we're not, there's other organizations, but when people are tone deaf to what is happening, I think that creates tremendous challenges for organizations when they're not listening to what people are saying. I mean, I think to your point earlier around, how do you work in this environment? And I think the most important thing that I can see in doing it and working with different organizations is just to say, you have to be present. You have to find that way to have people to create a level of high trust. Now, people that when they make really bad mistakes like that, it's time for them to move on, right? And I saw one that was really egregious in another company yesterday. Happened last night, and the CEO, or over the weekend, the CEO is resigned because it was the CEO.
Boy, that is something.
Yeah.
So may I ask you, Siobhan, are there major changes like that right now going on in Australia?
Yeah, we've been seeing protests as well. Aboriginal Lives Matter. I think one of the things that I would say to that is we have a tendency to punish the individual players but ignore the systemic patterns. So to my point earlier, we focus on the dancers but not the dance. We focus on individual behaviors, but not what's going on in the system and the patterns. And by patterns, I mean the hidden, often hidden, implicit agreements between the parts. And one of the agreements that I see happening, and there are multiple of them, but one of them is that you have the oppressors, you have the people who are committing the acts of violence or cruelty or unfairness, the oppressors, and then you have the bystanders. And this is the bystander pattern, where there's an agreement between the oppressors and the bystanders that we condone or we don't say anything when we see these acts of cruelty, unfairness, or unkindness. And the bystanders actually fuel the pattern. So we're complicit in that pattern with our silence or with our agreement not to say anything. So you don't get these behaviors in isolation. They are not about individuals. They are always co-created. Patterns are co-created in a culture. They don't sit on their own in isolation. So when I look at any culture with noise, I always say, well, where is that behavior being fueled from? What is the pattern that connects, as Gregory Bateson, the great systems thinker, would say? What is the pattern that connects? And I've been looking and examining it from that perspective and noticing this bystander pattern, which I think is not helping us. And it's so good to see now people stepping up and speaking up and starting to take action. But one of the things I also think is that we have taken action before, but not necessarily the right actions. So you've got to be able to see these patterns and to really reframe people's roles and step into a different role to rewire the often deeply embedded and invisible patterns in the culture.
Yeah, Mark, when Siobhan mentions this thing, the dance versus the dancers, so I'm not.
You can hear my Irish oars coming out there, dancers, because I'm Irish.
I'm tongue-tied. So So the dance means the whole process, the whole situation, right?
It's the agreements between the parts. So it's not just the dancers, it's the rules, the rules of engagement, the agreements between the parts sitting at the collective level.
Yeah, Mark, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I love the analogy that I look at it as kind of like you said, the collectiveness versus the individual, right? The organizational piece versus the person, and it's a terrific way to be thinking about it. But again, I don't want to sound like a broken record. I think that when you have issues in an organization, it's how you deal with those issues on a consistent basis. That's what creates your culture, right? If you allow that to happen, then you have a culture that it's okay. Versus if you have a culture that says this is how we're going to operate. That's why it's so important to have these things, if you want to call it your talent philosophy, your leadership attributes, your values. When there's difficult moments, that is your North Star. That is it's not a hard decision to make, even if it's a very senior level person in the organization, which is a challenge. But if you are creating a particular dance, right, and then the dancers are just following that, right, and if there's a challenge with what that is, you really have to go back to what is the culture. And I think that when you have it, we used to have this at SC Johnson and Abbott too, all companies. But at SC Johnson is a family-run company, 5th generation family-run company, and they had their, if you want to call it, their creed, and it was truly lived. If you had an issue and it was a moral or other kind, you had the creed, and the creed was your guidepost, and everyone connected to that, and it was easy to make decisions, because when you got into meetings, we would go back and say, all right, what's our creed? I'm using slightly different language, but and that became your way to kind of connect to, you can't tolerate that. We had in different organizations, we had people that were they were getting the results, but how they were getting the results was a real problem. And if you tolerate that, you won't have a what I would call a high trust organization.
Yeah. So Alicia's commenting, she wants clarification on actions and processes. I think what you just said, Mark, helps get to that. And now she's asking about, well, why not? Why have people who don't get it, quote unquote, even be a part of the program? I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, Alicia, but it's a matter of selection and involvement.
Sorry, I'm trying to do multiple things, so I was trying to listen in and do this. But so what I'm asking is, I'm looking for maybe somebody else's perspectives on actions and processes that can be taken to address the systemic versus the dancers, as we're referring to them in this. Like in HR, there are definitely a few I can think of, and that's an example that I gave there. But I'm curious to maybe hear some additional perspectives. So the example I gave is a part of like training managers to understand that the playing field is not even prior to someone coming in the door. So if you have 2 qualified candidates, it doesn't mean pick the one with the higher GPA from the premier university, because even from its origin, there was not an equal playing field to get that education from a premier university.
Yeah. Good point. Siobhan, what do you think?
I think, and this is what I talk about in the book, the first step is to diagnose the patterns that are keeping you locked in and what you may have even become invisible to. So, and often these patterns are not even spoken about, like why is it that you don't have a diverse workforce in your top executive team, for example? And what are the assumptions that are keeping you locked into that? Is it that, even looking at females, looking at people from different ethnic backgrounds, there will be assumptions that are running that system, which is, oh, well, women don't have the experience in this area, or whatever that might be, or people of color, X, Y, Z. So I think the first thing is to start with the executive team examining what are the patterns, what are the assumptions, and then what are not just the technical solutions, because I think people go very quickly to technical fixes. Let's put in a policy, let's put in a process, let's put people onto training. I've seen that happen so many times. Let's send all the employees on bias training. And it's like this sheep dip and nothing happens at the end of it. You still go back to the old assumptions and the old patterns of running the organization, but it feels easy. Let's donate some money. It's a technical fix. So this journey is not an easy journey. And often I say it's about the executive team creating a subsystem of change. So they see themselves as the agents of change. They meet on a regular basis. They step into their change role, and they regularly step back. I call it on the in the book that they're on the bridge as well as on the deck of the ship. So they're looking at how is the journey going? How are we traveling? How are we progressing? How do we need to shift? What assumptions do we need to bust next? Where is it going well or not so well? How are we progressing? What is the data telling us? So rather than pushing it out to others and training people and donating money and putting in policies, it's more the adaptive work that needs to happen, and that's where you'll see the real shift. But that's hard, and that's not something that we're used to doing. And also there's not many people who can facilitate that type of work with executive teams, and often they need a good coach to walk with them on the journey.
Got a question for you, Siobhan, also Mark, and Alicia also, if you want to chime in. Can you motivate with money? Some kind of reward system of, well, first of all, having a program where you can identify successes, small successes, one right after another, perhaps, leading up to an achievement line, and then people who demonstrate that and mean it sincerely get some kind of reward. Do you think that's a good idea, or am I off the wall?
Is it specifically on this issue, or just more?
Of growing, of change, personal growth.
Yeah. I mean, if I give you an example from ANZ, where it was a bank in Australia where we wanted to change the culture, and we decided that in order to deliver on our business imperatives, we needed to create a more customer-centric culture and an employee-centric culture. So we actually balanced scorecard, and executive rewarded on customer satisfaction scores and employee engagement. And that was much more balanced than in the past, where they just got rewarded for delivering on the financial results to shareholders. So I do believe in change programs. You can put in a system of rewards that helps reinforce your change goals.
Yeah, Mark?
I agree with everything you said. The only thing I would add is, the language we used was, people need to have the specific goals. So I get that. That's the what. The how is really the leadership. And, if you have clarity around this is how we're going to operate as leaders, then yes, and that does become a very important process when you say results matter, but how we get the results matter as much or more. Okay, they matter more, actually. And when you start impacting people because either they have done an amazing job of that and get more recognition financially and otherwise versus not, but people aren't motivated just by the dollar. It really is motivation by the environment and the kind of environment they want to work in. That's why the culture matters so much. It's because that's how you win. You win with the culture is the way in which you have great success. And Gary Ridge and lots of other people have done amazing work in this area. And Siobhan now, and that's really what you have to be able to do.
Totally agree with that.
Okay, so we're crossing into the new now. We're already there, but probably going to be another new now. A bridge over troubled waters, if you will. So from your perspective, Siobhan, and from your book, how can organizations begin to take steps and get, meaning they encourage their teams, their people, and their customers to think differently about something in order to get to a better workplace? It's a cultural thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm speaking to HR professionals. If you're an HR professional and you're in an organization that's struggling to perform, that maybe isn't achieving its potential, that maybe is not adapting quick enough, then what I'm saying to HR professionals is that you have an opportunity here to step more into your change role and to help managers who are coming to you for that advice. And the answer is not another engagement survey. You know, I think for too long, culture has been conflated and collapsed into and meshed with just being around engagement. And we've got to equip ourselves with tools that move beyond engagement. And of course, engagement is an essential part of culture, but it's not the only part. So managers today are saying to HR professionals, can you help me create a higher performing, adaptive, commercial, customer-driven, agile, innovative culture? And engagement isn't going to cut it. So this is one of the things that I'm saying, what is your toolkit? And this is why I've come up with this 4-step solution. It's about, you know, the power of reframing, the power of breaking these patterns in the culture, and being able to step into that role with managers and say, I've got some solutions that can help you to survive and then thrive in this new normal, because we all know in times of disruption, there are going to be winners and losers. So how can we lean in more to that role?
Oh, thank you so much. Mark, do you want to give a summary or where we go from here?
I love what you said. I think, you know, everyone is looking at how can we be more agile, right? And then when you start trying to define that, you know, it goes back to the very first point is you have to have some definition of what is your destiny. You have to have the definition of what success looks like. And I think when you can have great clarity and great focus with your team on what those things mean. And I learned, I think one of the greatest things I learned when we were, you know, moving into our new organization is we also really celebrated not only the successes, but I was so impressed when we didn't have a success, and we also spend time talking about that and what can we learn, and not creating a culture where, you know, we all learn from the hardest things. If you think of our own personal lives, the biggest struggles that I had in my life, I learned the most, right? And it's such a great opportunity when people have a challenge, you know, when you work 2 or 3 years or longer to potentially bring a drug to market and it doesn't happen. And you think, oh my God. But when your chief executive officer and your chief scientific officer said, there's a lot that you did and we're learning and we're going to accelerate for the next time. And we're going to learn from what we had here and take all the good in that and continue to build on, right? So I think that is such an important part of good organizations are really open about, you know, what have we learned from our challenges. And I think we're at a very important point here where, you know, again, we just have to listen. We have to spend time. I don't know what it's like to be in some situations that other people have been in, but I can be empathetic. I can listen. I can ask questions. I can ask them to help me and what can I do to support you in that journey. When you do those things, I think better things happen.
I think that we're going to come to a close now in a couple of minutes. This has really been exciting for me to be a fly on the wall between you guys. So thank you for the education. But if you can just imagine the things that are going on in some government offices and agencies like World Health or WHO, World Health Organization, and some of the U.S. situations right now, it's craziness. I mean, it's so sickening. I don't even want to watch the news anymore because it's a distraction from what I have to do with my own business survival and life. And I'm sure that in your organization, maybe not to the same extent as what's going on here in the U.S. at the moment, but everyone's looking for some kind of pathway, some kind of leadership. And it seems like the Prime Minister of New Zealand is an angel at the right time in the right place. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, Jacinda Ardern has really stepped up. You know, I've said in times of disruption, the leaders are revealed, and it is an opportune time now to take stock, step back onto the bridge of the ship, get out of the, get off the deck onto the bridge and take stock. What are the storms ahead of you, and what are the winds of opportunity that are blowing your way? Because there will be opportunities in this time. And then what is the culture that will enable you to create this winning momentum in the future? And that culture won't be created through writing new values and behaviors. We know that doesn't work. And I often say culture is one of the most talked about but most misunderstood concepts in workplaces today. You've got to get over that myth that it's just about writing and publishing new values, and start equipping yourself with the tools to create a more adaptive, agile and resilient culture in the future that can serve your business and help you to meet your business goals.
Yeah, Mark, in the language of agility and Scrum and things like that, can organizations organize a sprint towards something that could solve some of these problems?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I honestly, I think that what we need today is leadership. We need authentic leadership. We need leaders that understand and truly care. And I don't want to make it sound so simple, but when you have that, and I just believe what everything Siobhan said is around, how do you build this trust culture? When you build a trust culture, and if you have that in your culture already, I think you can sprint. I think you can, because people are committed to the purpose, the vision, and they know that they're going to be treated with great dignity and respect for how hard they're trying to get there. So I think you accelerate. But I also go back to what you said in the beginning. You have to start with, what are the assumptions, what are the patterns, what are all those things that we need to do, and how do we want to do those? And I think if you could just focus on those. But the only other thing I'd add is we need so much. People want people who are going to listen, and we want to be with people that are positive, right? And yes, we need to be realistic. This thing that I heard from Marshall Goldsmith, pragmatic optimism is one of the most important things we can have right now. Yes, it's difficult, it's challenging, it's all those things, but we have to have positive energy around there are great possibilities in the future. And if we can bring people together in that arena, and the leaders who are doing that, and there's lots of them, they're going to be the ones, and their teams are going to be the ones that are going to be very successful.
Yeah, Siobhan?
Yeah, one of the things, I think we're coming out of a period where we've had to frame our role as crisis managers, and into a period now where I would say reframe your role as an ambiguity navigator. You're navigating, you're like rafting in white water, and you're navigating in ambiguity. Get comfortable with the gray, equip yourself with the tools. This is a time for learning, and see yourself as an ambiguity navigator, finding the next wins and the possibilities in this time of disruption. And then you will be much more likely to succeed. And I talk about that, the power of role reframing, to shift your mental map. So your mental map is like a GPS. It's like, you know, when you've got a GPS in your car and you haven't downloaded the latest information and you end up down the wrong street because it hasn't been updated. Well, often in organizations, we're like that. We're running an old mental map or an old GPS of our role, and we actually need to update that mental map. And Ambiguity Navigator is a good mental map. See yourself as, how do I navigate in this time of uncertainty and disruption to create a safe path for me and my business, and deliver on the business outcomes with the right culture. So that would be just, that was triggered for me by what Mark just said. Totally agree with that. But I think it's an opportunity to reframe and get the right GPS running yourself and running your department and running your business.
So Siobhan, once more, give us the name of your new book.
Yes, it's called The Insider's Guide to Culture Change, and it's available on Amazon. And the secondary title is Creating a Workplace That Delivers, Grows and Adapts. So it's not just fluffy, soft culture stuff. It's about delivery.
So it's right on for this conversation. I really learned a lot from you today. And Siobhan McHale on LinkedIn is a great read, and a lot of articles there and links. So thank you so much. Mark, once again, Mark has spoken at a few of our meetings in California, Chicago, and I think somewhere else, but I can't remember right now. But and thank you for being on Global TV again. Thank you.
Great. Siobhan, it was great too. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. Really enjoy the conversation. Thanks, Ed.
I learned from you. It's been really good. So we have a saying in our house that you can't change the wind that's blowing your sailboat, but you can shift the direction of the sail.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's cool. And maybe that's a bridge over troubled waters. If we just learn how to do that better. So thanks a lot for being here on Global TV.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, done.